Let me tell you about electricity. You believe you understand it, right? After all, it is everywhere around you. Electrons are moving through whatever you're using to read this right now. It powers your lights, preserves your food, charges your phone. It is ubiquitous, so naturally you get it, correct? All right then, tell me what actually happens when you plug something in. Where is the power truly coming from? What fundamentally is electricity? Most answers are fuzzy. Energy, people say, electrons in motion, current through a wire. But here is my problem with these responses. They explain nothing. They simply give the mystery a different name. Yes, electrons move, but what causes that movement? What drives them forward? And how does that driving force generate light, heat, or movement? The reality is stranger than you imagine. What we label electricity is fundamentally extraordinarily bizarre, and our educational approach completely obscures this strangeness. We present it as ordinary, controllable, mundane. But when you discover what is truly occurring, when you look beneath the surface, you understand we're controlling something genuinely remarkable, something that shatters your assumptions about reality's basic operations. Let me demonstrate. Consider this simple experiment. Grab some plastic wrap and tear off a piece. Rub it rapidly between your palms as if warming your hands. Now bring it close to your arm without making contact. Notice that your arm hairs are responding, rising up, drawn toward the plastic. You're actually sensing the plastic exerting force on you across empty space. Pause and consider this moment. You simply rubbed plastic. Nothing more. No batteries, no circuits, no energy source. Just mechanical friction. Yet now this plastic can reach through air and influence your body. How is this possible in everyday experience? Forces require physical contact. You push furniture, you touch it, you pick up objects, you touch them. Forces need contact. Except here is plastic, completely separated from you, pulling your arm hairs through nothingness. People dismiss it. Static electricity. Elementary schools, unimportant. You're witnessing the force binding every atom in your body. The force enabling all chemistry. The force allowing neural signals, muscle contractions, vision itself. You're observing one of four fundamental universal forces demonstrating action across distance, and you consider it trivial. This is our problem. Electricity has become so commonplace, we've forgotten its absolute impossibility. Let me explain what occurred. Rubbing that plastic strips electrons from your skin and deposits them onto the plastic. Perhaps a few trillion excess electrons. And here is the mind. Bending part. Those surplus electrons hate each other. They repel with forces beyond human comprehension. Let me attempt to convey this. Take two electrons. Separate them by 1 centimeter. The electromagnetic force between them exceeds the gravitational force by 10 to the 42nd power. 10 with 40 second power. 10 with 42 zeros following it. Electromagnetic force so incomprehensibly overpowers gravity that gravity becomes essentially non-existent. For electrons, gravity is meaningless, irrelevant. Electromagnetic forces are everything, so here is the puzzle. If these forces are monumentally powerful, why doesn't everything explode? Why doesn't matter disintegrate? The answer borders on miraculous cancellation. Consider atomic structure. The nucleus contains positively charged protons. Surrounding them are negatively charged electrons, positive and negative, plus and minus. These charges obey one fundamental rule, like charges repel. Opposite charges attract. The forces are perfectly equal in strength. Repulsive push equals attractive pull. In ordinary matter, you get intimate mixing of positive and negative charges, protons and electrons packed as tightly as physics permits. Every positive charge surrounded by negatives. Every negative surrounded by positives. They balance. The tremendous repulsive forces cancel against equally tremendous attractive forces. Everything becomes neutral. The forces remain. Those colossal electromagnetic forces continue acting, but they're balanced so exquisitely that the net result is zero. And because the forces are so massive, even microscopic imbalances create perceptible effects. When you rub plastic wrap, you displace perhaps 1 electron per trillion, essentially nothing, yet sufficient to raise your arm hairs, because when underlying forces are this enormous, even the smallest excess produces noticeable results. This transforms your understanding of matter. Pick up a cup and hold it. What are you sensing? You think you're feeling ceramic solidity, physical substance. Incorrect. You're sensing electromagnetic repulsion. Electrons in your hand repelling electrons in the cup with tremendous force. You cannot push your hand through the cup because electromagnetic forces are so powerful that electrons refuse to overlap. Your hand never actually touches the cup. Not truly. A microscopic gap always exists between atoms in your hand and atoms in the cup. You're not experiencing contact. You're experiencing electromagnetic force pushing back. And here is what should fundamentally restructure your worldview. Every force you've experienced is electromagnetic. Every push, pull sensation of touch, pressure, or resistance is electromagnetic repulsion and attraction. Acting across distance, you have never actually touched anything. Ever. When you think you're touching something, you're sensing electrons, repelling electrons through empty space. The identical force you observed with plastic wrap, just operating at smaller distances, where forces become enormous. Now let's discuss wires. Wires run throughout your home. One end connects to an outlet. The other end connects to a lamp. You flip the switch. The lamp illuminates instantly. What just occurred? The conventional explanation suggests electricity flows like water. Electrons enter one wire end, travel its length, and exit the other end. This explanation is fundamentally wrong. Electrons in wire move incredibly slowly, roughly 1 millimeter per second. At that velocity, electrons would require nearly 30 minutes to cross your house. Yet the lamp responds instantly. So what is really happening? Here is the crucial point. The wire is already filled with electrons. Copper contains abundant free electrons, ready to move. Closing the switch creates voltage difference. That voltage pushes electrons at one wire end. But because electrons repel across distances, that push immediately affects the adjacent electron, which pushes the next, which pushes the next. Imagine people standing shoulder to shoulder in line. Push the first person, and the last person feels it almost immediately. Not because the first person walked the line's length, but because the push transmitted through the crowd. The push travels through wire at nearly light speed. Not because individual electrons move fast, but because electromagnetic force acts instantaneously across distance. That is what makes electricity practical. You can push here, and something responds there, almost instantly across enormous distances. But where does the push originate? Let's trace backwards. Your lamp connects to an outlet. The outlet connects to wall wiring. Those connect to power lines, which connect to a power plant, perhaps miles distant, perhaps hundreds of miles away. And at that power plant, something rotates, a massive turbine weighing tons, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. That spinning motion, occurring miles away, powers your lamp. How is this possible? The connection between that spinning turbine and your lamp is magnetism. Electricity and magnetism are identical. They're not separate phenomena. They're two manifestations of one unified force, the electromagnetic force. Moving electric charges generate magnetic fields. Changing magnetic fields generate electric currents. They're inseparable. Here is generator operation. You spin copper wire inside a magnetic field. The magnetic field pushes electrons in the copper. The electrons resist movement, but the field persists. You force electron flow. That is electric current. That is everything. Motion plus magnets plus copper equals electricity. Now reverse it. Push electricity through copper wire inside a magnetic field. The field pushes moving electrons. The wire moves. That is a motor. Identical phenomenon. Reverse direction. Generators convert motion into electricity. Motors convert electricity into motion. And this works because electricity and magnetism are unified. They're aspects of the same underlying force. This should seem impossible. You're saying I can move metal in one location and other metal moves elsewhere, with nothing physically connecting them except thin copper wire. Correct. You're saying spinning a magnet near copper generates a push that travels through wires and makes other copper move. Correct. And we utilize this constantly. Every motor, every generator, every power grid on Earth operates on this principle. Water falls at a dam. Turbines spin. Copper moves through magnetic fields. Electrons get pushed. The push travels through hundreds of wire miles at nearly light speed. It reaches your home, makes electrons move through a motor. Your fan activates. Water falling in one place makes a motor spin elsewhere, miles away, connected by nothing but thin metal wire. That is insane. You don't even need permanent magnets. Take a copper wire coil, run electricity through it. The moving electrons create a magnetic field. Now move that coil near another copper coil. The changing magnetic field pushes electrons in the second coil. Current flows despite no physical connection. That is a transformer. That is how power grids function. Just copper, just motion. That is all you need. Metal communicating with metal across empty space using electromagnetic fields. Now here is what should completely transform your perception of reality. I mentioned earlier that all forces you feel are electromagnetic, all pushing and pulling, all touching and pressing. But consider the implications. The normal forces, the mechanical forces you experience daily, those are not fundamental. Those are consequences of electromagnetic force. Electromagnetic force is fundamental reality. Everything else derives from it. When you push a door, you're creating electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your hand and electrons in the door. When you walk on floor, you're held up by electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your feet and electrons in the floor. When light enters your eyes, you're detecting oscillating electromagnetic fields, causing electrons in your retina to move. It is all electromagnetic. Chemistry is electromagnetic forces between electrons in different atoms. Heat is atoms vibrating because electromagnetic forces hold them in position. Biology is chemistry, which is electromagnetic. Your entire sensory experience of reality is electromagnetic interactions. And here is the deepest insight. You cannot explain electromagnetic force in simpler terms. You cannot say it resembles a spring or resembles a rope, because springs and ropes are made of electromagnetic forces. Electromagnetic force is fundamental. It is one of 4 basic natural forces. You must accept it as a brute fact about reality, and then everything else gets explained through it. That is uncomfortable because electromagnetic force acts at a distance, and that violates your intuitions. You've evolved to understand contact forces, but contact is illusion. There is no contact. There is only electromagnetic forces acting across tiny distances. To understand electricity, to truly understand it, you must rebuild your intuition from scratch. You must accept that the universe is made of fields permeating all space, that charged particles push and pull across those fields. That action at a distance is the rule, not the exception. When you flip a light switch, Here is the actual story. You close a circuit. Electrons throughout the entire circuit begin moving slowly, roughly a millimeter per second. At the power plant, a turbine spins. Magnets rotate near copper coils. The changing magnetic field pushes electrons. Those electrons push the next electrons. The push propagates at nearly light speed through hundreds of wire miles. The push reaches your home. Electrons flow through the thin filament. The filament resists. It is difficult for electrons to squeeze through. That resistance generates heat. The filament heats sufficiently to glow white. Electromagnetic waves radiate outward. Some waves hit your eyes. The oscillating electromagnetic fields cause electrons in your retina to move. Those moving electrons trigger chemical reactions. Signals travel through your neurons to your brain, and you perceive light. Every step is electromagnetic. The turbine spinning is electromagnetic forces. The signal traveling is electromagnetic repulsion. The resistance is electromagnetic forces. The light is electromagnetic waves. Your vision is electromagnetic. Consider how extraordinary this is. 200 years ago, none of this existed. Then we discovered these forces. We figured out how to manipulate them. We built machines that could generate electricity, transmit it across vast distances, and use it to perform useful work. And in doing so, we completely transformed human civilization. Electricity gave us instant communication. Telegraph, telephone, radio, television, internet, all electromagnetic. It gave us artificial light. Cities that never sleep. It gave us motors, machines that can perform work without human or animal muscle. It gave us computation, billions of tiny switches manipulating electromagnetic forces to process information. Everything, every single aspect of modern life runs on electricity. And it is all based on this one insight, that there is a fundamental force acting across distances. And if you learn to manipulate that force, you can accomplish things that would seem like magic to anyone from 2 centuries ago. So what is electricity really? Electricity isn't a thing. It is not a substance or a fluid. Electricity is what we call it when we manipulate the electromagnetic force to do useful work. But more fundamentally, electricity is proof that the world is not what it appears. The world appears mechanical, solid objects pushing against each other through direct contact. But that is an illusion. The real world is made of fields and forces acting at a distance, particles pushing and pulling on each other through empty space. When you see plastic attract paper, you're seeing the fundamental force that makes chemistry possible. When you turn on a light, you're commanding electromagnetic fields that permeate all of space. When you understand that, when you truly understand what is happening, everything changes. You realize the world is electric, that forces act at a distance. That solid matter is just a carefully balanced dance of repulsion and attraction. And you realize that humans figured this out. We discovered these forces. We learned to manipulate them. We built a civilization on top of them. That is one of the greatest triumphs of human intelligence. So next time you flip a switch, remember, you're not just turning on a light. You're manipulating fundamental forces. You're making electrons push each other across entire cities. You're converting motion to electromagnetic fields, and back to motion, you're wielding power over nature itself. And that is what electricity really is. Not a utility, not a convenience. A window into the fundamental nature of reality and proof that humans can understand and manipulate that reality. That is the real story of electricity. Not comfort, not familiarity, truth.